of that nature. I heard the meeting's being recorded. That's good. Great. I think I just wanted to share a few minutes of reflection on the COP, because I've been to the first COP I went to was in 2007 in Bali, Indonesia, the so-called, that was COP13. And the thing, I think that we took quite a large trade union delegation from the United States. And the thing I noticed was just how confusing the whole thing was. If you haven't been to these meetings, there's a vocabulary, there's a history, and so these comments are really just a sort of alert to comrades who are new to the process, and then we can move into the meat of COP26 and what unions are trying to do there, what we want to achieve, which is the question of this meeting. So, as I think everybody knows, this has been a 30 or so year process. The reason why it's 26 is because there's 25 previous COPs spanning 26 years. The whole thing started in the late 80s. I don't have time to go into all of the data or the history, but comrades will know the presence of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC or UNFCCC, which was brought together because science was pointing towards a serious issue, global warming. No one really knew how serious it was at the time. And the UN also convened the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, whose 6th assessment report came out a couple of days ago and of course made headlines. But not everybody knows who the IPCC is. It's a body of scientists, more than several thousand, I believe now, who engage in peer-reviewed studies of different aspects of climate change. And every 5 or 6 years, they produce a report on where we stand as a civilization, really, in terms of climate change. And then there's the COP itself, Conference of the Parties. Parties, in this case, are signatories or parties to the original agreement, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. That most people may know this already, but hopefully it might be useful for those who didn't. So a couple of things to add about the process. I mean, we've seen unions getting involved in the COP around about the mid-2000s, I would say. And I was not part of that. It took me another 2 or 3 years before I got involved with the US side, long before TUED was established. But well, unions went into the COP process thinking most of the important decisions had been made, that the approach that would be taken by the UN would be compatible with the neoliberal approach, which was privatization, liberalization, and that decarbonization of the economy would be a big business opportunity. And this is crucially important for unions to grasp this, that this is the height of the privatization wave going on around the world, structural adjustment programs in the global south, and a tax on public services. So these two processes are very linked to each other. And it's still the case today that the main neoliberal institutions who have dominated the UN system now for 20 years are putting forward this approach. The best way to fight climate change is to get the states out of the way, unless the state is providing money, of course, and incentives and subsidies, and have the private sector be satisfied that their investments will provide returns and make profits for them. So it's crucially important to know that. It was articulated again in the 2006 with the Stern Review. But as these policies are put forward, that was the the economics of climate change report that came out in 2006. But of course, what we've seen and I'll skip over this in the interest of time, what we've seen in the last 14, 15 years since unions got involved is a number of things. First of all, the science gets more disturbing. Secondly, the policies to deal with rising emissions are becoming increasingly ineffective. Emissions continue to rise. So this private sector approach has basically been a massive transfer of public money into private hands with very little impact on the problem. In fact, the problem continues to get worse. So the policies have failed, the emissions continue to rise. What hasn't changed in my view, and I'm speaking really personally, but I know a lot of TUED unions agree with this, is the politics of trade union movement often hasn't changed with it. They believed a dozen years ago, a lot of unions believed that there was going to be a major green jobs explosion and that the transition to a low carbon future was going to be beneficial on so many levels, that it was going to be effective. And our job as unions was not to concern ourselves with the question of the transition itself, but really fight for workers and make sure that they were protected when the transition occurs and that they would benefit from the jobs that were created. But what we have now, and I'll conclude on this, is a much more serious situation where these meetings are coming up with more and more ambition in terms of the targets, more aggressive timetables in terms of reducing emissions, but they cannot implement those targets and timetables. So we're seeing a more and more a distance, a disparity between the ambition and the action. And I think it's safe for unions to conclude that it's pointless going to Glasgow calling for more ambition from leaders. They don't know how to solve this problem. And that's because they have left everything to the market, to the private sector, and their way of getting investment into the so-called green economy is to provide public subsidies and guarantees for profits. And we've seen it over and over again. These policies have failed. So I think this discussion is hugely important. I think there's a growing consensus around the trade union movement that we need to be very confident about asserting a public goods approach, that we need to be defending public energy and advocating for the reclaiming of energy to public ownership. And so that, I think, is just, for what it's worth, that's just a few thoughts on the history of that process, the COPs. And I'm looking forward to this discussion today and sharing some information and hopefully seeing you all in Glasgow, where we will be working alongside our comrades in Scotland and around the world around a bold pro-public agenda. So I'll stop there. Thanks, comrades.
Thanks, John. Thanks so much for that context. I see
Merci,
claps.
John. Merci infiniment.
And support for your words and also the historical context that you've just laid out for us. Thank you. I think we're going to hear now from some different speakers we have lined up who can share some insights to both what's being planned on the ground and also how unions are thinking about what the activities might be, some of the challenges unions are facing, etc. So we're going to start off with Roz Foyer, who's the General Secretary of the Scottish Trade Union Congress, STUC. So I'm going to hand the floor over to you, Roz. Oh, and sorry, just a quick reminder that for the interpreters, if everybody could speak slowly and clearly, just so that they can follow along, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll certainly do my best to curb my Glasgow accent and speak as slowly as possible to the interpreters. Can I firstly say thank you to TUED for inviting me to speak today to all of you on behalf of the Scottish Trade Unions Congress and to bring you our greetings and solidarity. As the Trade Union Federation for Scotland, which, as you know, will be the host nation for COP26, we're also a trade union federation that is based and has always been based for 125 years in the great industrial city of Glasgow. And Glasgow is a city with a strong history of trade union activism. So we look forward to hosting COP26, and we look forward to working with all of you in the weeks and months ahead on our shared campaigning priorities in the interests of ordinary working people around the world. And I think Sean touched on it, but I don't think anyone who has heard the recent UN climate report can have any doubt at all that there's a really urgent need for radical action to be taken on the climate crisis if we're to avert, you know, heavily catastrophic outcomes. So yes, you know, we need to address this climate crisis seriously for the good of all of us, but I think we all realise it will be down to us in the trade union movement to work together so that we can achieve a fair transition to this greener economy and an economic transition that doesn't disadvantage our people or leave any of our communities on the scrap heap. And I think we all know well that in so many other economic transitions that have taken place, that's exactly what has happened in the past. Big business is protected, but the ordinary people on the ground are the ones who pay the price. And for us, it's important that we get together and start to look at how we can structurally change our economy to prevent that. So I'm going to start by saying a bit today about some of our domestic campaigning priorities here in Scotland in the run up to the COP and beyond. And I think you'll find that many of them chime in very closely with the TUED approach. We are first and foremost striving at the moment to build a genuine people's recovery from the pandemic. And that people's recovery that we are calling for is about calling for, you know, systematic changes to how our economy is organised and really shifting that narrative around private good, public bad. And we're also wanting to see our economy being rebuilt based on a just transition. And we don't believe, you know, everyone talks about a just transition for workers, but we don't believe that that just transition is being carried out by governments at this time. So we want to see a people's recovery from the pandemic and a people's transition to net zero. And I think that you would agree with me that the COVID crisis and the climate crisis have both brought into sharp focus the fact that the private sector and big business have proven themselves as being totally unable to meet the economic and social challenges that economies across the world now face. I think the writing was already on the wall when ordinary people through their governments were forced to bail out the banks during the financial crisis of 2010. And the latest incarnation of this are the various government rescue plans that we've seen across the world during COVID, which, however necessary to save jobs in the short term, have really been largely focused on bailing out the bosses and the private sector. So as we look forward to the vital need to decarbonise and achieve net zero through a just transition, it's quite unthinkable that this could be achieved without massive government intervention and without the efficiency and the accountability that can only be delivered by direct public sector delivery. So the first way in which we're approaching COP26 here in Scotland is as a campaign and leveraging opportunity. We plan to use COP26 as a means to build awareness and build working class power and make demands to government which are rooted in the real material needs of working people in Scotland. So to that end, we have identified 3 campaign priorities which we will be focusing on in the months running up to COP26. Number 1, firstly, we need to see real good quality jobs in renewables. Scotland has no shortage of renewable energy. We have wind and wave power, and we have, you know, a good transition on paper towards renewable energy. but our low carbon and renewable energy economy is dominated by private and overseas interests. Apart from one single demonstration turbine off the coast of Scotland, all of Scotland's offshore wind is controlled by private corporations or overseas government at this time. And these companies are all too willing to offshore jobs and ship content in terms of the hardware required for our renewable energy projects from the other side of the world. Now, for us, this makes no sense from a social and environmental justice perspective. And it's led to the ongoing, what's called here in Scotland, the battle for BIFAB, to bring work into our fabrication yards here in Scotland. But rather than unions having to mount reactive campaigns based on whispers about the next contract from industry bosses, what we need is a publicly owned energy company and systems to build renewables, run energy networks, and coordinate upgrades, ensuring that renewables work isn't offshored halfway around the world, but that it is based on local supply chains, local skills, and building local jobs and new industries for workers. And the market will not provide that. That needs to be done by big government. Secondly, we would like to see a green retrofitting programme for our housing and our buildings through a street-by-street retrofitting programme. Two of our biggest cities here in Scotland, Dundee and Glasgow, have very high levels of housing which is unfit for use. And quite simply, if we want to reduce emissions and create jobs and tackle fuel poverty for our people, then this is the biggest single intervention that we could get our government here in Scotland to make. But currently, much of the retrofitting and much of our current construction sector is characterised by highly questionable employment practices, such as bogus self-employment and the exploitation of migrant labour. So to create good quality, unionised jobs and ensure that profits aren't hoovered up by the rich, what we need are publicly owned and publicly delivered street-by-street retrofitting programmes here in Scotland. And we believe that this could be best delivered through Scotland's local authorities, through our local elected councils. And thirdly, we need to take back control of our public transport, particularly of our buses, and pilot free bus travel. In Glasgow, where the COP26 is taking place, there are high levels of poverty and half of all households don't have access to a car. And yet our privatised bus network means that private companies benefit from government subsidy while cutting routes and hiking up fares for those who can least afford it. So whether it is for reasons of climate change, whether it is for cutting air pollution for our citizens, or for reasons of social inclusion, worker safety, or supporting our clean, green domestic bus manufacturing here in Scotland, we would like to see publicly owned and affordable bus travel. So these are the type of campaigns which we believe are rooted in the material needs of working people, and which trade unionists, environmentalists, and community groups can rally behind. And that would unite movements around class, climate, and community welfare. And at the same time, on the ground in Glasgow, it's quite possible that we may see industrial disputes that coincide with the COP26. Some of these could be linked to our refuse workers who are dealing with cuts to rubbish services. We have Glasgow City Council workers here in the city who are dealing with severe cuts to community facilities, with 500 plus jobs under threat at this time, as well as real-term cuts in pay for local government workers and ongoing equal pay issues. Or we have our hospitality workers who will no doubt be asked to look after delegates on 0-hour contracts on the minimum wage. And of course, the STUC will be ready to stand with any group of workers who are in dispute with their employer, either during the COP or beyond. And I'll turn now just to some of the logistics of COP26, because beyond our domestic campaigning priorities and industrial disputes, I just wanted to touch a little bit about our role during the COP itself, which, as you know, takes place between the 31st of October and the 12th of November. Although, to be honest, please note that much of what I'm telling you about is still up in the air, and we're very much dealing with a movable feast, which will be ultimately dependent on the COVID restrictions which are in place at the time of the COP itself. So firstly, I'd like to tell you that we do have a newly built headquarters in Glasgow. It's a small building, but it does have a meeting room that can accommodate around 50 to 80 people. And we've already provisionally booked out that meeting space for some events and meetings, including the ITUC Strategy Day on Sunday the 7th. But we can seek to accommodate further requests. So please get in touch with us if you think that you may wish to use that facility. Secondly, and I'm sure there are others here who will know more about this than me, but the STUC will be supporting the activities of the COP26 coalition. I understand that they are still planning for a large mobilisation in Glasgow on Saturday, the 6th of November, alongside decentralised mobilisations throughout the rest of the UK. So restrictions dependent, we will be supporting efforts to mobilise for that, including through helping to organise a trade union block in the demonstration. And beyond the mobilisation, the COP26 coalition will be running a People's Summit that's primarily going to be online, and that will be between the 7th to 10th of November. The coalition has also sourced some venues, and I believe there will be 2 or 3 civil society hubs or convergence spaces in and around Glasgow where activists can gather, connect together, network, warm up with some food and drink, because it is cold in November in Glasgow and it can be very wet, and book out some meeting rooms or socialise. The coalition is also running a homestay network where climate justice activists who perhaps don't yet have accommodation can be linked up to people in Glasgow who would be able to accommodate them. And thirdly, we plan to engage in a number of events that are running throughout the COP. So as well as being part of the formal ITUC delegation and potentially participating in side events in the official COP blue and green zones, we also envisage speaking at a wide range of events as part of the COP26 People's Summit, and potentially other events with international partners, including the TUC, the ITUC, the Just Transition Centre, and TUED. Now, many of these events haven't yet been finalised, and they will cover a variety of topics. But for us, these many, the variety of these events is important, not only to raise the campaign issues that I outlined earlier, but to shift the political consensus around public control and public ownership. It's crucial that we start to shift that narrative if we're going to tackle climate change effectively. So they're also crucial for us in engaging young people and climate activists together into trade unions and making the case that organising in the workplace and in our communities to build a strong mass movement for change, not simply lobbying those in power and letting them make the decisions, but actually, pushing their decision making and driving their decision making through the power of the people. That is going to be really crucial in the fight to tackle climate change. And as a movement, we need to think about how we use our collective power in the workplace and in communities to confront those in power at the highest levels on climate change. And finally, I should mention that we're holding a conference on the 2nd of September with our partners in the Just Transition Partnership, and have lined up a range of international speakers, including Sharon Burrow from ITUC, Sean himself from TUED, and Azad Rehman from War on Want. And we can send you details of this event if that would be helpful. So as I said in the beginning, we very much look forward to working with all of you in the period ahead. Unity is strength, and we want to face up to and address the serious issues that the climate crisis will no doubt present for working people, our families and our communities. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ross. That was excellent kickoff to today's program. Strong people-centered message and a pro-public power effort that we can unite around. So thanks for that. We're going to move on to hear from Sam Mason, the policy officer at PCS, who's also active in the COP26 Coalition's Trade Union Caucus. And Sam's going to share a little bit about what she's been up to in that caucus, and also about what's coming up. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Irene. Thanks for this opportunity to give a bit of an update. And just to say as well, I'm one of 2 trade union representatives. The other is Stephen Smiley's from Unison on the COP Coalition coordinating committee. So I think that's really important that we've sort of been given that place on the coordinating committee as well. Ros has thankfully touched on a few things I was going to mention, so I'll skip over those. But just for those who are not familiar, the coalition is a broad civil society range of groups. It covers environmental groups, grassroots groups, regular big NGOs, race and social justice groups and faith groups, and of course trade unions, which is really important. And I think I'd just add, I'm just going to focus on what we're doing from the trade union side within the coalition, not obviously the other trade union related events, which I'm sure others will mention as well, sort of through the ITUC and national delegations. But I just realized the other day, we have actually been going since towards the end of 2019, and everybody is feeling really tired. So it's been quite hard to sustain efforts over these past year, particularly when the COP got postponed. I'm sure it's the same for everybody, but there's an enormous amount of work going on. And I think, as you've heard from Ros, with just some of the activities around the logistics, the visa support systems, etc. That there's so much and too much to cover here. But I think one of the important things for us was being able to establish the trade union caucus quite early on. So that gave us a space within the coalition for really rank and file grassroots trade union membership to meet together and develop our strategies about mobilizing for the COP, and that's been really helpful. And there's some comrades on here I see that have been part of that as well since the beginning. So we've really sort of worked on building some common message, doing a bit of political education, if you like, around some of the issues of the COP, such as carbon markets, producing some hopefully accessible resources for trade union members to understand a bit more about why this is important for all of us, and workers and trade unions in particular. But of course, the other important side of it is it means that every discussion, we are getting a workers' voice and trade union voice into those discussions across the COP, and I think the COP coalition. And I think that's been really important to obviously link up with some of the grassroots and environmental groups and other groups about why the trade union and worker voice has to be so strong in this movement as well. And this is also not obviously about what happens in November. It's been very clear from the outset, the coalition is about building these relationships after the COP, you know, pretty much as we had that sort of road through Paris when it was the Paris COP. It's very much about building our strength. And again, really important for us in the trade union movement that we don't just have this big push in the next couple of months and then kind of tick the box, go home and don't follow up on all these discussions. And importantly, the very specific stuff around energy, democracy and public ownership, which has already been highlighted. So the main actions in November is going to be 48 hours of action that's been called. So we're expecting there to be a call out for a global climate strike on the 5th of November. There will be a mass demonstration in Glasgow on the 6th of November, which will be family friendly. And the aim is to have a trade union and worker block on that, because I think one of the other things we've done recently as well is to recognise it's not just about trade unions in the UK. There's lots of workers that are not represented by trade unions, and it's important that they're not left out of this discussion, they're brought in as well. So working with another organisation to link that up. So Glasgow will remain to be the main demonstration throughout the COP, but we will have what we are calling decentralised actions across the UK, from Belfast, Manchester, Bristol, so all areas, so no regions and nations as well. And additionally, to also have 20 countries identified. I haven't seen those countries identified yet, but there is an international committee that meets as well as part of the coalition, where the coalition will put resources into trying to build actions as well in those countries. But of course, that doesn't exclude any others or any other town and city. It's just, as a coalition, we've got limited resources, not surprisingly. So it's about where we're trying to really focus some of our efforts. So once have information on that, we can share. But I know some comrades on here have already sort of spoken to me about some things that they're planning, and it's really good if we can build that and get that information out. And obviously, where time zones permit, we're trying to synchronize that with the Glasgow demonstrations as well, so everything kind of happens at 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock and so on the Saturday as well. Ros has mentioned the People's Summit, so I won't touch on that, but that is now open for submissions until the end of the month. So if any trade unions or groups here want to think about putting in submissions, and you have to get in now, but just to be wary that they will probably be composited with other submissions as well. So it's very unlikely that we will get exactly what we may ask for as well. So I think the other thing that it's important to mention in terms of how we're trying to build the trade union response, in September, not September, we're not there yet, in July, we held through the coalition a meeting of general secretaries, so UK general secretaries, and the STUC was represented as well, to try and get the unions at the senior levels behind all of these activities. And it was very well attended. We had the Unite General Secretary there, the Bakers Union General Secretary there, and number of education unions, obviously some that couldn't come along to the meeting, but it was a really good start. And 3 actions that we've got coming out of that is getting statements of endorsement and support for the coalition and sort of demands around the COP. Obviously money, trying to get unions to commit to actually supporting the mobilisations in Glasgow and elsewhere. And there'll be another meeting on the 17th of September, which will focus on more local and regional TUC organising, and a final meeting in October where we'll bring back together the national leaderships, ITUC and TUC and STUC around then. So I finally just end on some of the political messaging. Now, obviously the trade union caucus, whatever it does, is still kind of accountable to the wider coalition. So we're not putting out our own statements unless they're agreed off by the wider coalition. But I think we're sort of happy, at least in sort of the core messaging will still be around the message of climate justice and centering Indigenous frontline and global South communities, and rooted in the language of solidarity, transformation and justice as well. And linking up, and again, it's already been mentioned, the intersections of the multiple crises that we're now seeing and obviously pre-existed with, you know, the economic political systems, but also COVID, racism and other crises that are going on. So one of the just to mention the top line themes and key messages, I must admit I've just come back from some leave, so I'm not quite sure if these have been signed off yet by the coalition, but the three sort of key messages that are being put out are no more cooking the books, so for solutions and sort of net zero, rewrite the system and start a worker-led justice transition, and global climate justice, so focusing around reparations and redistribution in the global south. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. And I think the final thing and the kind of message which I put out, we are obviously hoping to try and get clear trade union worker blocks on all the demonstrations, whether it's in Glasgow, London, or in any other countries as well. So we are identified as a group on the marches. We will have our own sort of slogan at the front of our block, which is yet to be decided, sort of similar around climate justice jobs or whatever that happens to be. So we will finalize that in the coming weeks as well. But I think that the key message is that we can't, as workers or as trade unions, keep saying that it's got to be about us. We've got to be central to the solutions if we're not going to turn up on the streets and not just protest, but put forward our demands and make those really clear as well. So hopefully we'll pull this off, but it will mean everybody working really hard to get that down through all their networks and across the unions. And obviously those of you who are able to come to Glasgow in November to be part of that block in Glasgow as well, make sure everybody gets down there, and we start amplifying obviously the demands and the things that we talk about in the TUED network, and the focus of obviously the reports as well that's being worked on at the moment. And finally, so I should just mention, obviously individual unions are working on their own statements as well, and different contributions, so those will all come together and we can share some of these around. And I think personally I can do an update on this and some of the key actions which hopefully can be shared around the TUED network into this mailing list as we go through in the next couple of months, so everybody can keep up to date with where we're at. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Really excellent report on the different activities going on and sort of the perspective and politics of it. Both for you and for Roz, if after the meeting, if we can get some of the events that you've discussed today, and we can, you know, I can make a list of them and we can send them out to everybody, that would be great. So then people can know what to get involved with and how to get involved with. And Alana Dave also posted in the chat, they have another meeting in just a minute, so she's not going to be able to speak about public transport. However, they do have a number of events that they are going to be, or actually, Alana, I see you still here. I don't know if you want to say a quick word. If not, I'm happy to go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Irene, and I'm sorry we're not able to stay, but we've got a big meeting around our global campaign, the Futures Public Transport. Roseanne, I'd be really interested in linking up with anything kind of local around public transport. But just for whoever is interested, we have a number of transport events, but also a number of events related to kind of public transport. We're using COP as an opportunity to intensify pressure on governments for investment in public transport as part of the recovery from COVID. But we're also using it as an opportunity to really build a public transport movement with a public goods approach to public transport. People have heard me talking before about our approach to public transport, so I will send a list of what we're doing to Irene and Sean to circulate, but also feel free just to get in contact with me individually or as organizations if you're keen to become involved in any of our transport or more specifically public transport work. Thanks.
Thanks, Alana. And Alana has posted her email address, so feel free to reach out to her directly. We will also send that along when we send out the other materials. So thanks for joining, Alana, and sorry for the late start. Let's go on. And just in the interest of time, because we did get a late start and would like to have some time for questions and discussion at the end, if the next three speakers could potentially shorten and summarize just a little bit so we have time for some discussion and questions on the floor. Okay, so the next speaker we have is Mika Minio Palulo, and she is the policy officer for climate and industry with the Trade Union Congress in the UK. So I will pass mic to her.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Wonderful how we transitioned across. If only we can, do that all the time with everything. If the transition to a zero carbon world were that effective, that would be great. I will cut short what I was going to say, especially because Roz and Sam have covered lots of things that I would otherwise cover. I think because we don't have someone from the ITUC speaking because Bert's on leave, so I'll just mention that obviously, I guess the TUC will be supporting the ITUC within the negotiations to some extent in terms of supporting the delegation and pushing for the ITUC's main objectives within that kind of official negotiating space, which are around raising climate ambition with just transition embedded at the heart, making sure that human and labor rights are part of that climate transition and new programs, that climate finance to decarbonize the global south is expanded and actually delivered, not just promised. And finally, that we see proactive industrial policies and investment to actually deliver the change. So obviously there's the role there in the negotiations. We're also trying to work now and have been for the past 6 months to build pressure on the COP26 presidency, which the UK holds. It's the Minister Alok Sharma who's leading on that, particularly to push for a greater role and focus on just transition within that space. They have been, although the civil servants are very engaging, Alok Sharma continues to not respond to requests for meetings with our General Secretary and with the ITUC's Sharon Barrows. So that's quite frustrating, and I think does represent the overall approach that the UK government takes to engaging with trade unions. But hopefully, nonetheless, over the next 2 months, we can build more pressure on that. The TUC on regional offices are hopefully going to be building turnout around the mobilizations that Sam spoke to. I think it will vary between different regions, depending on, so the London East and Southeast TUC office has committed to building and supporting mobilizations in London. We'll see how that works elsewhere. And we're also going to be involved in putting on a range of fringe events, ranging from workplace action to questions around how UK corporations are driving climate violence and extraction in Colombia and Brazil and elsewhere, questions around public transport. It'd be great if people want to be involved in those to hear from people. And please message me in the chat, or otherwise I'll also put my email in the chat. A lot of our work in the run-up to COP is building pressure on the UK government, trying to use that opportunity that the government is claiming climate leadership and claiming that it's, showing the way for the world, which we all know is not the reality. The UK has a historic responsibility given colonialism, given the UK's role in carbon emitting over centuries, to deliver both international solidarity, but also to deliver a rapid and just transition. We're not seeing that the UK government, for all its claims in terms of large levels of investment, is lagging behind even on a G7 level. It's putting a fraction of the investment per person in than any other G7 country. So there's a lot of work there to put the emphasis going, well, if the UK government is claiming that leadership, it needs to be a reality. And also that climate transition clearly needs to involve public sector leadership. Like, unless we see the public sector having a central role within delivering it, then the climate transition won't be delivered at the pace it needs to be, and we won't see it delivered in a fair and just manner. And whether that's around public transport, or as Ros described in terms of insulating homes being delivered through councils, street by street, it's been demonstrated. In fact, the UK government's Green Homes Grant, which was only delivered within England during the in the past year, which was meant to be their flagship green job creator. They promised 100,000 jobs. We ended up seeing barely 10,000 before they scrapped it. The component within it that went through local councils actually worked much better. So it demonstrated that local councils do have the ability to deliver at pace, although nonetheless local councils were still outsourcing far too much of it. So there's, even then, we need to be holding local authorities to account, saying these need to be good green jobs that are in-house. And finally, a lot of their work focuses around making sure that green jobs are actually quality jobs. There's a lot of assumptions. We hear this all the time when we talk to government, also when we talk to green groups. They're just global green groups that just assume that green jobs will be quality jobs. And of course, we know that there are some green jobs that are great, that are well unionized, that have decent terms and conditions, but there are many that are not. And making sure that actually all those green jobs that are created, they need to be created and they need to be quality. And that's ultimately comes back to questions around power. And that's where I guess the other important part of our work we want to do in the run up to COP is around strengthening workplace struggles to decarbonize, and going like, we need to have that. And unless we're able to show the power that unions have within the workplace, and that includes high carbon workplaces and our role within those workplaces to drive decarbonization, to drive industrial conversion, and those ongoing struggles. So for example, GK, an automotive and engineering firm that has plants, for example, in Birmingham, building components for fossil cars, they're planning to shut down within the next year. And the workers there have developed, together with Unite and with outside supporters, have developed an alternative business plan going, here's how we could actually be producing key components for electric vehicles that will be needed in the immediate term, and increase the role of the domestic supply chain for the electric transition, helping to hit the electric car targets that the UK has. But the asset stripping private equity owners of the company have rejected it and like, no, we're going to shut you down anyway. So the workers are currently balloting to strike. And I think there's an important role within COP, in the process up to COP and during COP, to highlight those struggles that are present right here and right now. Or Rolls-Royce, Inchinnan, which is on the Clyde, like just outside Glasgow, also, and there's another site in Lancashire where Rolls-Royce committed to a Green New Deal, to investment and transitioning those sites to be part of the transition, where workers are currently also facing redundancy, and that some have also, there has been some strike action. So going, how do we strengthen those struggles now? How do we get them more attention? Because the limelight is looking to Glasgow, and there is that theatre, the media attention that we know ultimately there's only so much will be achieved inside. How do we use that to build the power outside as well, and within our unions? And as Sam said, that the battle isn't going to be won or lost at COP in November. This is about building power, building that momentum in a manner that runs on, but we still need to use it at the moment and then be stronger coming out of it. And I'll stop there, so I don't use up too much time.
Thanks so much, Mika. If there are things that people can get involved with that you're organizing or thinking about, please feel free to share that information. And I know you said you would pop your email into the chat, which will be very helpful. And thanks for laying out some of the ITUC goals for the COP. Let's see. Okay, next we're going to hear from Barbara Figueroa, who's the Sustainable Development Secretary with Trade Union Confederation of the Americas, TUCA, also an affiliate of the ITUC. And we really, there are so many complicated issues right now, given the situation with COVID and the pandemic. And we know that because of the inequities globally, the power dynamics, et cetera, that there are issues with vaccination access, there are issues with, resource distribution, et cetera. So we are really trying to think about how we can help any Global South unions who are trying to get to Glasgow to think about that and to facilitate in any way we can. But I'm going to hand the floor over to Barbara, who maybe can share some of what you're experiencing, as well as any insights you have. So Barbara.
Hola, muy buenos días.
Hi, good morning from Chile. It's a pleasure to be here. I thank you for the invitation, and I'm in representation of TUCA, of the Trade Union Confederation of the Americas. We have been having diverse meetings about COP26, and I'll be talking about what we've been working on so far. And also from TUCA, we've been, since the beginning of this year, since April, we've been working on a Congress that highlighted clear priority messaging. One of those messages was about the development of the Americas, focusing on key sectors that are important to a just transition and to the environmental justice. Of course, we understand the connection between the just transition and the environment, but we also think that it's important to highlight the overall arguments, the political arguments that contest space and political logics against the neoliberal model in favor of alternative development models and frameworks. As you all know, the healthcare crisis around the pandemic has had multiplying effects, not just directly regarding COVID, but also regarding the politics that our governments have adopted to justify neoliberal policies, and what that has done to deepen poverty and inequality. And so we are not naive. We know that they push these agendas forward, using COVID to justify those policies. And in our region, we know that that has a lot to do with the geopolitical positioning of our governments, of our states. And so we need to focus on what builds power from the South. When we look at COP26, it's a challenge which we have to assume differently than we used to. We can't continue to operate under a status quo. We have to evaluate the new elements in place. And we know that there are sort of new ways to gaslight and to put makeup on the same old arguments. We know we have to identify those arguments for what they are and provide alternative arguments and contest that ground. The union movement has an important role to play in that. The union movement is able to put the role of transnational capital and of geopolitical dynamics at center stage. We need to talk about those elements in the larger debates around climate change and transition in such a way that clearly lays out that this isn't just about humanity at large, of course it is, but also in particular about some regions and the extractivist dynamics and logics in those regions, those particular regions from the global south. At the same time, we know that many of our countries in the global south are top contributors to emissions. So I'm sorry that I don't have my camera on at the moment, but I've been listening to all the interventions and this meeting, and I think that that we're spot on, that we need to have a clear messaging that we take to COP26 beyond the formal bureaucratic systems in place for our intervention. No, we need to build on the power that we have been constructing in response to COVID, and we need to interfere in this space. I know that time is brief in this meeting, so I want to keep my comments quite short, but absolutely, our priority has to be to have common concrete messaging and demands to intervene in the debates around just transition, a debate that is inherently political. We know that it isn't just a question of bettering the recipes that we've been using. We really need to rethink the elements that we are putting forward in our arguments. And as I was saying, this is absolutely a global trade union movement, but at the same time, we need to highlight the role of global South unions and to have a very clear understanding of the diverse multilateral interests in this transition, know who has what interests, and be able to, from that analysis, put forward a path that is favorable to trade unions. So I'll leave it there, but thank you for this space. This is just one short greeting, but I hope that we can continue to work together, especially building up to COP26 and these political debates, these multilateral contestations of power, and a construction of a world post-COVID. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Barbara, for your words. And absolutely, we need to go to COP with a clear message that really builds power and builds on the power of the South. So thank you. Last, we're going to hear from David Boys, Deputy General Secretary from Public Services International. I'm looking at the time and I'm wondering if people can stay on for 10 minutes past the original meeting time so that we can have a little bit of time for questions and discussion if needed. I'm going to just put that out there as a proposal and we're going to move on to David. So David, hand the floor to you.
Thanks, Irene. Just checking my audio signal. Are we good? We're
yes.
Good. Okay. I'm not putting my camera on because I'm actually on vacation, and it's only because Chu had called me in, and I know that if I don't obey Irene, I'm in deep trouble. But welcome everybody. As mentioned, I'm with Public Services International, and it's no mystery that going into COP26, we see energy as the key sector for mitigation. The TUED reports over the years are absolutely fundamental, and they deliver empirical analysis that shows that the private sector isn't delivering, won't deliver, can't deliver, and that the public sector, the governments need to step up. But what we notice is that there remain lots of misunderstandings about how to move the energy sector to low or zero carbon. There's lots of work that remains to be done, including in not only with energy unions, but all unions, because Every single area of productive work requires energy in one form or another. So clearly, if we're going to reach the mitigation targets of lowering our emissions, energy sector is one key player. Not the only, there are others, but energy sector is fundamental. And so everybody who's on the call, already you're either curious about the work of QED, curious about COP26, eager to engage on climate. But let me say up front that the work that the comrades from QED are doing is fundamental for our fight to reduce our carbon footprint on this planet. So if you're not affiliated yet, well, they don't do affiliations, but if you're not supporting QED, you need to do it, and you need to do it fast, because no one else is doing this type of work. Let me say, and we've heard it already, that the nationally determined commitments of governments, this NDC planning is key. But guess what? Most governments don't want to hear from workers, don't want to hear from trade unions. They just don't want to hear about it. So we've got to develop messaging that goes beyond our core labor issues, our bread and butter issues. We've got to develop messaging that reflects society, because if we stick with our traditional bread and butter issues, we get denied, isolated, denigrated, and ostracized. And this has been going on for the past 30, 40 years, where the private sector has managed, and their allies in government have managed to reduce the labor movement to a shadow of its past. So for us, it's about reaching out in the communities in which we live and work, building trust with other community actors, getting to know them, to learn how they deal, but also to teach them about why and how the labor movement needs to project its power. In many instances, about what the labor movement is and why we make society more just and equitable. And this is something that we need to do at the COP. We need to project a positive image of labor, but we need to understand and increase our vocabulary in what we talk about. So for PSI, the core message is the 40, 50-year weakening of governments and public services and the massive growth of corporate influence over all politics, including through lobbying at all levels, from cities to national to global. And for us, we see this in whether it's the trade deals that protect investors and not people, not small farmers, not informal workers, not women, but that protect investors, that protect hot money, and that protect the financial environment in which sometimes our pension funds are equally involved. But one of the things that few people are aware of is that government is the single largest purchaser of goods and service on the planet. Whether it's your local government, your state or province, or national, government has a lot of influence through its procurement. It's just we need to figure out how to make sure it doesn't go only to the lowest cost proposal. But also remember, in public services, employment tends to be more highly unionized, with more women and more minorities. So collectively, we must all protect public services, their workers, and their unions. And it's time now to spread the awareness of how public services are key to our collective future on this planet, whether it's the response or lack of to COVID, or the much needed and horribly delayed response to the climate crisis. And it means we need to get involved in politics. We need to engage in local politics, in national politics, for the broader societal issues that we need for our families and communities. So for us, when you look at it, what are the key public services we need to highlight at the COP? Energy, I've mentioned. Public transport, ITF and Alana are very good on. What about the firefighters out there right now? What about the flood control, the health and social services? All of this is part of the climate solution. We have got to have a broader agenda. And so this needs to be one of the platforms. The COP is where we must continue the struggle to put public services in the position they deserve, and to push back against the half century and more of neoliberal disaster recipes. So for us at the COP, we're probably not going to influence the negotiations. We're probably going to be with the unions, with the environmentalists, with the women's movement, the youth, and we will position public services, and we will encourage stronger democratic institutions to meet the needs of all and not just the 1%. Thank you very much, Irene.
Great. Thank you, David. Thanks for really highlighting the need to push for not only broad public services, but also public energy if we are going to have just transition and tackle climate change. We're going to move on to open the floor for anyone who has questions or comments. I just want to say that TUED will send out a survey. We are interested in knowing who is both interested in attending the COP in person and also who is vaccinated, because you know, the issue around vaccination is critical. And it affects a lot of the details in terms of actually being at the COP in person. So we, in the coming days, will be sending out a survey to everybody here and also to ed unions, so that we can get a sense of who is thinking about attending and doing so in person, and also vaccination status. So that's just a heads up. So I'm going to open the floor, and I see a hand here. John.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you to all the presenters, and I agree very strongly with all the main lines of argument that are being put. Just to say, my name is John Molyneux. I'm a trade union and political activist in Dublin in Ireland, but I'm also coordinator of the Global Eco-Socialist Network, a broad network with people on all 5 continents. What I wanted to emphasize in this is the question of the actions that we can take using the COP26 conference as a focal point for that. I'm afraid I don't have much hope that it's going to deliver anything, or that we can influence the powers that be greatly, but I do think we can mobilize the movement. And here, I think for those of us not in the UK, the emphasis should be not on trying to get to Glasgow in the present situation, but on what we can mobilize in our own countries, among our own working classes and our own people. I know individuals will have reasons for wanting to get to Glasgow, but I think the main political priority is, can we deliver mass mobilizations on the streets, whether we're in Dublin or Johannesburg or Sydney, on the 6th of November, and whether we can actually get some workplace action in the strike that's being called for on the 5th, on Friday the 5th of November. So that's where I think the emphasis should lie. And in this connection, I particularly think we should try and establish links with Fridays for Future, because I know they've called a strike for the 24th of September. But if we can link with them on the question of Friday, the 5th of November, that will make it possible, I think, for lots of people to go on strike or to take action of some sort in their workplaces in solidarity with Greta Thunberg and Fridays for Future and the school students. You know, why just leave it to school kids? We want university students, we want teachers, we want other sectors, workers and so on, in it with a rolling momentum. So those are the main points I want to raise. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, John. Absolutely. Thanks for bringing up Fridays for the Future, and also thinking about long-term strategy in terms of building and mobilizing people. I see Joshua next.
Thanks, Irene, and thanks everyone. Just wanted to echo what David Boyce already said. I think the COP26 is an excellent opportunity for us as steward to put forward our argument that indeed there is a need for emergency transition towards renewable energy. So I'd really like to propose that we have, we hold as steward, we hold an event that would make energy democracy as a big issue, as it should be in COP26. Now, whether we do that exclusively as steward or preferably with every other groups on the ground, to me, that's something that we can just plan later on. Thanks.
Thank you, Joshua. Indeed, as we develop our plans, we will be sharing that with people and encourage people to get involved, both in person and online, depending on how things play out. Alison, I see you next.
Oh, hi. Yes, Alison from Unison, London. Yes, we are going to take a small delegation to the COP26, but mainly to promote and support the work that we're doing. We are going to produce a report around really how is the UK government going to fund public services to meet net zero, and obviously the call for nationalisation of energy as a huge part of our recommendations. And we're going to have a fringe event, or the launch of the report, on the 8th of November. And what I was just wondering is, we're going up between the 5th and the 8th, which I think is always the busiest time, that mid-weekend of COP. Obviously, because we've got the global rally on the and demo on the 6th. And Bert's not here, but my understanding was on the 7th, there was going to be a focus on trade union activities or events, and the ITUC itself may have an event. But also, it's going to be very limited who can attend because of COVID restrictions. Even our event, we're having to put in place COVID restrictions, which means that we're trying to get it live streamed, for example, there and then, so anybody can watch it around the globe. We'll have PSI, Rosa Pavanelli from PSI has agreed to speak with us, and also we'll have EPSU hopefully. So what we're doing is, we don't think putting our General Secretary with an observer's badge in the delegation is what we want out of the COP. What we want is to send a really clear message around what public service unions are asking. We're literally going to cost what we think, the transition is going to cost for public services. And really, that shows up Alex Sharma, who is the president of COP. And really, in a way, we'll be challenging head on what the UK government hosting COP is actually really doing or not doing. So we've got a quite clear contribution to make. What we've decided is everything's going to happen outside the Scottish Centre rather than inside. And so I think it'd be really good if we had maybe a list of trade union fringes that we can all go to attend to or go online. Also, I was just thinking, because of the problems we had at the beginning of this meeting, I'm not sure what the capacity will be for the COP coalition's online digital meetings. They've got updates at 5 o'clock every day around what has happened inside the hall, whatever, the convention centre. But I'm not sure what capacity there will be for lots of people to log on to those updates. So there's a sort of issue there that I don't know Sam can update us on what they're thinking around that. I know you can get up to 1,000 people, for example, on some platforms, whatever, but there could be more than that if it's global. And their target's 20,000, I think, is what they want as an audience globally. So yeah, I just want to say, therefore, that we will be inviting Sean and Ed and other people. We will be around. Our General Secretary is very keen to attend trade union events, support, raise press and awareness around our call for public ownership in the transition, everything. So do get in touch as well. If I will be in touch with Sean. I've already spoken to Mika about what we're doing. And really, we want to know what else are trade unions doing, really making a difference for this COP, because we think we are really going to make a splash around public services with PSI and EPSU. Okay, so I'll leave it there, thanks.
Great, Allison. That's a great note to end on. I just want to note that Sam has posted that Fridays for the Future will call a November 5th strike. So that is happening, and there's ways to build solidarity there. Anyone else? Okay. If not, I'm just going to reiterate for both all the speakers and other people who are
Irene,
involved.
can I say something? Sorry.
Yeah, let me just finish this. Just for everybody to send me their activities and all the things that people are planning that people can get involved with, either in preparation for the COP and mobilizing people, as well as what's happening during the weeks of the COP, so we can get all that information out to everybody on the call. Natalia, and then I see Larry. So Natalia first, go ahead.
Sí, yo, ¿se escuchan? Y puedo hablar en español, ¿cierto?
Yes, Natalia, go.
Hear me.
We can hear you and you can speak Spanish.
Okay, thank you. Lo que yo quería decir, creo que
What I wanted to add is something that someone said in the chat already, which is about having one document that has all the activities that are being organized, you know, and to know if it's an official event, if it's an extra official event, if it's a civil society or exclusively trade union space. It would be very, very useful to have a categorization of all of the activities that are being planned. It would be extremely helpful to have that kind of centralized document so that we can plan what to participate in and how to prioritize. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalia. Just so everybody knows, the interpreters have a hard stop in 3 minutes. So Larry, if you can give a 1 minute intervention.
Sure. Yeah, I think even less than that. I just wanted to say great session. I think our biggest concern is as you mentioned, that we should indicate vaccine status and stuff. But, you know, we have a very few countries where, you know, the majority of citizens are actually getting vaccinated. Our concern is going to be participation, especially from the global south, you know, and people not being able to travel. So we're going to have to definitely look at increasing the virtual aspect of this conference. And we'll do whatever we can to help that come along. But of course, we'll be talking with TUCA and with ITUC. But that's going to be our biggest concern, I think, at this point.
Thanks, Larry. Thank you for raising that. Okay, everyone. There's 1 minute before the interpreters need to absolutely get off. So I just want to thank everybody for coming out today, for showing up on the Zoom, and again, for the really excellent transition we made from one Zoom meeting to another. I appreciate everyone's cooperation and ability to do that in a coordinated way. Thanks again. We will get information out to people. Thanks so much for the speakers and all the information that you shared, and also the sort of political angle of where people are coming from. This is going to be an exciting effort to mobilize, and there's a few months before the actual COP. So let's get things going, and look forward to seeing everybody soon. Take care. If you would like to unmute and say goodbye, please feel free to do that.
Well done, everyone.
Bye.
And well over 100 people on for the whole call.
Thank you
Great.
all. Bye, everybody.
Good to see you, folks.
Meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Gracias.
Bye, everyone. Irene.
Gracias.
Chao, compañeros desde Chile. Un abrazo para todos.
Thank you
Gracias
so
desde
much,
Cali,
interpreters.
Colombia. Un gusto saludarlos. Feliz día para todos.
Au revoir.
Un gran
Muchas
abrazo
gracias
desde
desde Lima, Perú.
Valencia.
Au revoir,
Luisa.
merci.
Colombia presente.
Un abrazo desde Colombia, muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Chao. Chao, chao, Irene. Chao, gracias.
Beautiful.
Thanks so much, interpreters. Thanks
Yes, thank
for the
you.
extra 10 minutes.
Bonus points in karma heaven.